There's good news and bad news for the Philadelphia Flyers. The good news is they have the NHL's Rookie of the Month. The bad news, some injuries affecting the goaltending situation. Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers joins us to discuss that and a lot more next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers, also my regular Friday co-host on Locked On NHL. But today we're going to talk some Flyers and a little bit of a rough day Saturday for Philadelphia, not just the shutout loss, but Sam Ersson leaving the game early. What do we know and how bad could this be?
So as of recording, to be clear, we could know more by the time you're listening to this. We know it's a lower body injury. He did leave the game in the first period on Saturday, replaced by Alexei Kolosov, who is also an interesting story, the fact that he's the backup. But losing Ersson is going to be a huge factor because he has been pretty rock solid in net for the Flyers thus far, keeping them in close games, even when they don't end up winning the game. So this is going to have a huge impact on the Flyers moving forward, again, depending on how long Ersson may or may not be out.
Who would be the goalies going forward if Ersson has to miss a little bit of time?
Right. So entering the season, Ivan Fedotov was the prescribed backup goalie for the Flyers. He got a contract at the end of last season, which interestingly currently has him getting paid more than Sam Ersson, which is a whole other thing. But, he had been very successful in the KHL and came over and has had a bit of a rocky start to his season. And because of the situation with Alexei Kolosov, a Belarusian goaltender who was also in the KHL, and there were some, real questions as to whether or not he was going to come over this year. The Flyers wanted him over. They had signed him and brought him over at the tail end of last season, where he saw some limited action with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. But there had been sort of some word from the Kolosov camp that if he wasn't going to get NHL action, he didn't want to come over. But the Flyers were like, we own you. You have to. And so he did. And they kind of worked things out, and Kolosov got several starts with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. And I think because Fedotov had struggled, they called up Kolosov. And so the Flyers are currently carrying 3 goaltenders, which they can because defenseman Cam York is on IR and they have the roster spot in order to be able to do it. With this injury, it looks like Kolosov is going to take the lead position with Fedotov as the backup. Fedotov was the de facto e-bug for the Flyers at the game versus the Bruins on Saturday. And that was long-winded, but there was a long way to get there.
Obviously, neither of the two backups have great numbers in limited action. So,
no.
The Flyers have got to hope this is not a long-term injury.
I will say Alexei Kolosov has looked very solid in his 2 NHL games thus far. So small sample size, but coming in cold for an afternoon game when there's no full morning skate, I think is a very difficult thing for a goaltender to do. And he made 20 saves on 22 shots against a very determined Boston Bruins team on Saturday. So I'm counting that as a win for him anyway.
Well, that was the bad news. Ersson, his status still hopefully we'll get some more information soon. But the good news, Matvei Michkov named the NHL's Rookie of the Month for October.
Yeah, that was very good news for him. He got off to a very good start in his 11 games in October, 4 goals and 5 assists. Very good, very effective on the power play in those games, and really kind of added an element to the Flyers power play that hadn't been there. The Flyers power play was absolutely dreadful last season. Now it's just bad, which is an improvement, I would say. But some of the early success anyway was largely due to Michkov's presence. But Michkov has struggled the last few days a little bit. John Tortorella had not, I wouldn't say benched him, that's the wrong word, but had him sit for several minutes when he saw that he was struggling, showed him some things, and really only put him out there for his power play shifts for a section of the previous game before Saturday's game, and then let him play for the duration of the game. And I think that's helpful. He's 19 years old. He's going to take some time to develop, but certainly a tremendous start to the season for him in the month of October. Now kind of the rest of the season will take shape, and he's definitely still got a lot to learn as a young player.
What are the things he really needs to work on the most right now?
I think that his vision is so far ahead of what is going on out there to some degree that he has to learn how to work with the teammates a little bit better to make things happen. I think, teams are certainly, and in a lot of ways, rightfully so, going after him to some degree. And I think he's handling that very well overall. I think he can dish it out as well as he can take it in a lot of circumstances. But again, he is younger, and so he's going to bear the brunt of that, and sometimes not be able to accomplish what he wants to on any given rush. So I think there's a lot there, and he is making some mistakes in trying to be maybe too aggressive through the middle a little bit. Sometimes he really likes taking a shot from the slot. That seems to be his thing, and those shots are very difficult to take unless you are more experienced, right? So I think there's a lot going on there, but I think, I have no doubt that he'll be fine. It's just going to take some time, and he'll adjust over the course of the season.
Wasn't the best month to start the season for the Philadelphia Flyers. Need more consistency. Talk to me about what this team needs to do to sort of get on track and be more competitive.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. The first is that they had a very strong transition game last season that seems to have evaporated. That John Tortorella's mantra is always that good defense leads to offense, right? And the good defense has been struggling. So they haven't had the opportunity to transition to offense. Their defense has played a lot better in the last few games, maybe a little bit less so in this last Bruins game, but the 2 wins they had previous, like the defense actually played pretty well. But the transition aspect of it wasn't there. They were not getting really strong breakouts to be able to head down the ice in the other direction as often as they'd like to. And then when they get to the other end of ice, aren't getting multiple opportunities. It's a one and done situation and a lot of chances. So that's kind of issue number one. Issue number two is lack of scoring. Just the shots are not going in. And key players like Owen Tippett, who, had a hugely successful season last year, got a big contract, is like, he has 1 goal. And so, like, you really, really need some guys to come through. The middle six is just totally bone dry right now. You have a top line that's with Michkov, Konechny, and Couturier, who seem to be getting the bulk of the chances. And then you have some guys who have either been in and out of the lineup, like Bobby Brink, like Noah Cates. They're getting some opportunities, but like the middle lines are just bone dry. And that is not gonna win you games when you can only score 2 goals in a game.
At least the special teams look good, though.
Yeah, I mean, they're better. The penalty kill, which was good last year, is not quite as good this year, but still very, very solid. And like I said, the power play is off to a much better start overall. The second unit is better than the first, and they really need to invert that. As much as you want to have, like, Michkov is on that first unit, but I think that the second unit is showing a lot more creativity and have a lot more pep. And I think that they really should switch it around for a little bit, especially because they have Emile Andre, who got called up to replace Cam York, he's been in the last couple games, and he has a sense and a mind for the power play and is very offensively driven. And so with him quarterbacking that second unit, I think that's the way to go for the Flyers.
All right, Rachel, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
You can find Locked On Flyers at Locked On Flyers on all your socials out there. And my co-host, Russ Cohen, is at Sportsology. I am at Miriam. And we are out there covering the Flyers every day.
All right, Rachel, thanks so much. Looking forward to seeing you Friday.
Absolutely.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. You can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of Locked On NHL will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/LockedOn. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOn right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/LockedOn. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.